Hi, it's Lisa Salberg with the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association, here today with an introduction to the video you're about to see of our dearly departed friend, Mitchell Cole. As an introduction, I wanted to let you know how Mitchell ended up participating at the HCMA annual meeting in June of 2012, and some observations about what has happened since then. In the spring of 2012, I came across an article on a Google search that talked about a young footballer, soccer player to us in the United States, who was retiring from the sport due to his diagnosis of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I didn't know the details of the case. I reached out to Mitch and said, "Would you consider sharing your story with other patients at the HCMA annual meeting? Would you be our guest here in New Jersey?" And he accepted. We had a couple of really nice conversations leading up to his visit to the United States, and a lovely dinner the night of his arrival. And he spent the weekend meeting other people with HCM, talking to doctors, and actually becoming a bit more educated himself on his own disease process. And I think he was enlightened to see a lot of people like he and I with HCM doing relatively well, and some of them with pretty significant therapies that they've had to encounter. Through the course of the weekend, Mitch started off saying, "I don't need anything, I'm not at risk," to I think realizing that there was maybe a bit more risk than he maybe previously realized. A number of us talked to him about ICD implantation, and ICD is an implantable cardioverter defibrillator. It protects you from sudden cardiac arrest. Mitch talked about his newfound knowledge that he now had one risk factor, that his septal measurement was very thick at 3.2, and he recognized that and he wanted to process it a bit. We were a little bit more specific about our requests. I teased him quite mercilessly, saying, we can arrange it before you go back. We can have an ICD put in here if you want. Sadly, that didn't happen. Sadly, that did not happen. I did want to take a moment to review some important issues about diagnosis and management of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Number one, when somebody's diagnosed young, specifically adolescents, the messages that they get from their healthcare providers, their friends, their coaches, they carry a lot of weight. And while we look healthy, while we look fine, we have a very complicated heart condition. There are certain sports that are appropriate for those with HCM at certain levels, and there are others that are not. It's very difficult for an adolescent athlete to process this and understand that they are not, in fact, immortal. This isn't really a Mitch story. It's an all-adolescent story. It's a hard message, especially from a family who's probably never heard of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy before and looks at their kid and says, "Well, you look fine," but we're not. We need to make sure protections are in place for these kids and that we give them a good pathway to the future. I think Mitchell Cole will go down in history as somebody who's going to teach an awful lot of people about taking this disease seriously. Number two, risk factors matter. Here at the HCMA, I've worked with over 5,000 families with HCM from all over the world. And I find myself sometimes getting into conversations that they really want to debate with me or their medical provider what the risk factors are and aren't, because they don't feel like they're going to die. Nobody feels like they're going to die with HCM when you're young. You feel fine. Maybe you have a couple symptoms. But risk factors are real. They're scientifically proven facts that people with these particular issues are at higher risk for sudden cardiac arrest. Being diagnosed with HCM is only the start of the journey. Figuring out which risk factors you have or don't have are critical for management and survival. Mitch had a septal measurement of 3.2. This is a high-risk issue. This is documented in the medical scientific literature. It's not a debate. It's scientific fact. He was at risk. He wasn't protected. We all lost a friend. So diagnosis is important, but risk assessment, that's the difference between life and death. Thirdly, and I may take some heat for what I'm about to say here, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy management should not be determined on where you happen to live on this globe. It is a disease. It is known. It is complicated, but we do know risk factors. There's been a debate for some time, UK versus US. One risk factor or two, what's enough to get an ICD? Sometimes you don't have the chance of finding that second risk factor in time. I personally have lost too many friends, too many of the HCMA clients and families, while they sat on the fence waiting, one risk factor, two risk factor. I beg you to become educated patients, to know your own risk factors, and make decisions that are right for you with full informed consent and knowledge. I'm not suggesting everybody should get an ICD, even if you're at risk. If you choose not to, I gotta respect that. But if you have risk factors, and if you want to preserve life, I would highly encourage you to have a comprehensive conversation with your healthcare provider about ICD therapy. Now, you're about to see Mitch's story in his own words. It's compelling. You can see he's a young guy who's a bit confused still in some areas. And you can also see he's a bit fun-loving and quite an amazing young man that I am honored to have had the chance to get to know a little bit. Our heart breaks for his family, his community, his friends. Your loss is our loss. So, brokenheartedly, I hand over the videotape of Mitchell Cole at the HCMA annual meeting, June 2012. Rest in peace, dear friend. We'll miss you.
My soccer career started at 5 years old. I put my foot on a ball and never took it off. This is all the way through. Stayed in within professional clubs, signed a contract coming out of school for a Premier League team, playing international football for England, and you have a routine screening with signing for clubs. They screen every young athlete, football-wise, soccer-wise, for heart conditions. Most time comes back with nothing. They found something in mine but didn't tell me what it was for another 2 years because they wasn't sure whether it was athlete's heart or HCM, which is what the doctor was talking about earlier, the little crossover. And after 2 years, they come back to me and said, well, no, we're pretty sure it is this. Why don't you go see a specialist? Spent a whole year of doing treadmill tests with the 40-hour tapes and every possible test that I think I could have done, I did constantly for a year. After a year, we were still no further along. They still wasn't happy with me playing with the condition. I took it upon myself against doctor's advice, after being told I had the condition and the risks, to carry on playing. And I played on for another nearly 9 years. No symptoms. Had a very fruitful career, won a lot of things, played at a good level. Last February, I changed clubs, signed a 2-year contract. The club I'd signed for after 3 months weren't happy with my level of fitness and sent me to the hospital for testing. I saw a different cardiologist to the one I did at 16, and he forced me to stop playing. So if I hadn't have changed clubs, I'd still be playing. I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you lot explaining my story. But I'm happy. Like, I've got no symptoms, and I enjoyed a good career. But it's a slightly different decision to make at 25 as opposed to 16 years old. I was a petulant kid. I was strong-minded. I wasn't listening to what the doctors were telling me. I wanted to play. It was there. I was so close. I could reach it. So I don't know, I ignored the doctors and I carried on. 25 years old comes around, slightly different. I've got 2 kids now. I was due to be married. So it becomes a slightly different decision that I'm making. It's less of a selfish one and more thinking about my family. We went on to gene test my kids. We found out that my daughter doesn't carry the gene, but my son does. So we now know that we won't steer him down the route of soccer like I did. I don't want to have to come up against what I did at 16 years old, because I'm well into a career at 16 years old. I didn't pay attention in school because I knew this is what I was going to do. So now that we know that he's got the gene that they're saying 90% of the time will develop into HCM or some other form of sort of cardiomyopathy, we can steer him towards academics. We can steer him towards a sport that's not competitive, because it's hard to leave alone. I still find it hard not to kick a ball around. If I get the opportunity, I will go play a game, and I can't change that. But like I said, I have no symptoms. I have no ICD. I have one risk factor, which is my septum is about 3.2 or 3.3 centimetres thick. So I think it's pretty severe from what I'm getting from hearing today, but I feel fine. I've genuinely feel fine. I go on pure trust of what the doctors have told me. I don't feel any different to what I suppose a normal person would feel like. I don't feel tired. I don't feel I don't have palpitations, anything. I feel normal. So I have to go purely, I'm not playing on trust.
There was something that happened in February in the UK that brought this whole issue up to the forefront that we discussed, that made you think a little differently about things.
Yeah, an English footballer was playing in the Premier League, a fella called Fabrice Muamba. He collapsed during a game through cardiac arrest. And I mean, they got treatment to him within seconds. It's unparalleled. The treatment at the Premier League grounds is unreal. And he was he survived it. They brought him back, but his heart stopped for 2 hours. Wasn't pumping on his own for 2 hours. They was working on him, CPR, defibrillator, got him to the hospital. And I was sitting in the bar of the local football club, just finished playing a game that I shouldn't have been playing in, watching this game, watching something that could have happened to me. And it brought home a big amount of realism, and sort of become really surreal. And I've been working alongside a charity in England now called the CMA, doing the sort of stuff that Lisa's doing here, not on as big a scale as Lisa, because I don't think I could keep up with that. Just trying to do a little bit of media for them in terms of going on the telly and doing radio interviews and newspapers, just to try and get a bit of awareness out there, because it's not publicised at all in England. And it's just unheard of. I didn't know anyone who has this condition. So it interested me quite a bit when Lisa mentioned to come out here to meet so many of you people who've had the same condition as me, and to see that everyone's fit and healthy, and it's eye-opening for me personally. So thank you for it.
Thank you for coming.